What's going on, YouTube? This is the NCU podcast. I am your host, Noel, back at it again with another NCU reviews. By the time I'm recording this video, it is late, but I am just getting back from seeing Across the Spider-Verse. And man, was this a movie? This is something that can definitely be brought into a broader topic, and I'm gonna bring that in as I talk about the movie. But man, this was a phenomenal movie. Before we get into the review, because that's what this video is about, is a review on Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. If you guys don't mind, apologies. Please like the video, subscribe to the page, and hit that notification bell. Share with your friends as well. But without further ado, let's get into it. So, out of all movies, when it comes to that are being released when it came to 2023, there were honestly only two that I was excited about. This, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, being one of them, is, yes, it was literally one of them. Second, obviously, is Transformers, which comes out the following week. And, of course, I had my high expectations, and it's because of how Into the Spider-Verse was actually done. Like, I was very excited about it. And before I continue, let me also let this be known, if you haven't seen it in the title and you still click this video, this review will contain spoilers. So please proceed with caution. You have been warned. This video does contain spoilers. Now, if you're still here, let's talk about it. So it starts off with an amazing drum solo by Gwen Stacy. You get more into her backstory about being Spider Gwen, even though they call her Spider Woman in the movie. And there's another Spider Woman, but we'll get to that when we get to that. Nevertheless, Spider Gwen does what she does. Amazing drum solo. You hear about her past and everything dealing with her universe, Peter Parker, how he ended up passing away, and why she seems kind of distant, because there are people that are in her life, in her universe, but she doesn't connect with them as well. The only person she connects with the most is Miles Morales. Now, I was sitting there, I said, all right, I understand that. I get it. This is how we're building the dynamic, especially because comic book wise, they do get married. So we're really building more upon this love story. So I was really feeling that. Another aspect, especially as we continue with the movie, that I really enjoyed was Spot. Now, Spot is the main villain of this movie. And the thing is, what I really appreciate when it came to Sony is that they sat there and they took a hero, well, not a hero, a villain that you look at as goofy, like very goofy. Even if you go to like the original iterations of it, it was like some type of throwaway villain. Like, we ain't really thinking too much of this. It's kind of reminiscent of when DC rebooted the Suicide Squad and we had Polka Dot Man in there, and it's like, Polka Dot Man, what? This guy, and then all of a sudden just becomes just this, not powerhouse, but somebody that you actually have to, think twice before writing off. And the way that they did Spot, this man, a menace to society. Starts off goofy, not really knowing how to use his powers. They also went with the Amazing Spider-Man 2 type verses when it came to Spider-Man and Spot, like how they did when it came with Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man and Jamie Foxx's Electro. They kind of set it up like that. Like, oh, they ran into each other at some point, or they have some sort of history with each other, and just like Electro felt like, Spider-Man didn't really know him like that, or he kind of written him off and just kind of pushed him to the side. Spot felt the same way about Miles Morales, which in turn he did. He did look at him like well, you're just some sort of, villain of the week rather than somebody that can actually be a threat. And Spot, like Michael Jordan said, he took that personally. So eventually he ended up getting, because he was became Spot because of the collider that happened in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse 1 with, the particles and everything, and now, he's able to, like, each spider goes into like a different, they're almost like portals. But eventually he ends up going into himself, which I know that sounds crazy, but he ends up falling into his own spots. And he sits back and he realizes that he has access to the multiverse. And I know what you're thinking, like, oh, okay, well, it's Sony, so what are we really doing with this? First thing that we see as comedy, we see him in a Lego world, which I was like, okay, Lego Spider-Man, I guess they got video games of that. So cool. But then the next thing he pops up into is the Venom universe, like with Tom Hardy's Venom. Like you see the cashier who's like always sitting there at like feet, like lets Tom Hardy come in there and get the food. If you don't remember who the cashier lady was, think back into the Venom 1 trailer where you seen Venom grabbing that guy. He's like, "We are Venom," and then I guess he eats him. So yes, that lady literally had the whole theater just erupting like, "Oh my gosh, we might get Venom into the Spider-Verse movies." And there's a lot of things that might be set up when it comes to the next one because this is a two-part movie, by the way. But I'll explain why it's a two-part movie at the end. So, we then sit back and we get, more about Miles Morales as he's fighting and Spot saying he's going to try to access the multiverse and he's going to go through each different Spider-Verse or Spider-Man universe, find other colliders, take those particles and those other, I guess, spots, and he's going to become basically a multiversal threat. Like at this point, he's literally like he tries to become a walking calamity. Gwen Stacy ends up getting recruited by Spider-Woman and 2099 Spider-Man per se because they enter her universe because of what happened in Spider-Verse 1 with the collider and everything and how the universes, how they were glitching and everything and glitching through each universe. Some villains, by the way, an homage to No Way Home, some villains ended up in like the wrong universe in the wrong time period. You had a very old-timey vulture that was in Gwen's universe, and when 2099 Spider-Man pulled up, oh my gosh, this man was dripping main character, possible antagonist. He came in there just brute force, no games to be played, and Spider Woman, the actual Spider Woman, she was beating everybody up too. I'm not gonna try to curse in this, but she was beating everybody up too. And man, when I tell you that was some beautiful black woman power in that fight, and she was doing it while pregnant too. I found it funny that the way that they wrote her in the movie, she was not only just beating everybody up, but she was beating everybody up and throwing a motorcycle in their face. Like, why? It was hilarious, but action packed. Nevertheless, Gwen ends up going back to Miles Morales' universe. That's how the way you kind of see it, how it ends in the end of Spider-Verse 1. It kind of like plays around with that too. Him, Miles laying in his bed with his headphones on, and Gwen sitting back saying, "Hey, what you up to?" So cool. They kind of flesh out more about how they feel for each other. Miles Morales is going through issues with his family because he seems to always not show up or be late to very important things. And they're throwing like a really, really, disconnect between them, the typical superhero versus personal life. And I was like, okay, I'm cool with that. He ends up Miles ends up wondering how Gwen got to his universe. She tells him basically how everything, with the time travel, well, not time travel, with the universe hopping, she got recruited to help fix the Spider-Verse and the multiverse by 2099 Spider-Man and by Spider-Woman. Great, cool. So after that, he wonders, hey, I'm a Spider-Man too. Why can't I? And she's, oh, it's too many people right now. It's just a small group, and we already filled up. Fine, it's okay. Until Spot starts hopping universes, and Miles eavesdrops on Gwen and literally sits back and ends up hopping into the portal with her. This point, we end up meeting Spider-Man India. He was funny, very, very funny, very, very cheery. You had some jokes like them sitting there saying, Miles saying, "Oh, I love chai tea," and him getting upset because he's saying chai is also tea, so you're basically saying TT instead of like saying chai tea is saying TT, which funnily enough makes me definitely want to change how I order Starbucks drinks. Never, not saying I didn't fully know that, but very, very funny. Now, they're fighting, they're trying to stop Spot. Seems like they won't be able to get it done until Spider Punk gets there. Man, Spider Punk was one of the best characters in that film. Literally an anarchist, literally sitting there saying, I don't play by anybody's rules other than mine. They played with the joke that Spider Punk and Gwen might actually have something. I don't think that really goes anywhere. It's just Spider Punk is just a punk. So leave it at that. Nevertheless, you have it where Spider-Man India's love interest is about to die, but also her father's about to die. And Miles ends up helping by saving the father while Spider-Man India saves his love interest. And as great as this was, it ends up causing this giant, crazy rift. And nevertheless, it's like, okay, that's fine. That's perfectly cool. We don't know. Well, it's not fine. It's like we don't know what's going on, but at least the people are saved. And that's when we actually, no pun intended, we actually enter the Spider-Verse, where we see every single well, almost every single Spider-Man. There was a couple that I really wished were in there, but we didn't get them, and it's okay. But man, when I tell you the faces that showed up, whoo, I was happy. We seen Ben Reilly Scarlet Spider. We seen Spider-Man from the PlayStation games. We seen Spectacular Spider-Man from the TV show, Spider-Man Unlimited, the OG comic book Spider-Man. We seen so many iterations that if you are a true Spider-Man fan, this is the movie for you. You've seen so many. It was really, really like, it was a real good feel good moment. Like, especially kind of how it was with the Mario movie, where if you're a fan of it, you can literally point out references and do all this. And of course, being a Spider-Man movie and following the memes, they definitely, once you heard Get Spider-Man, they definitely had the moment where they all stood around and like pointed at each other and not knowing who they're talking about. Funny as well. But nevertheless, we find out from 2099 Spider-Man, because he's I guess, the head of the Spider-Verse, that the reason why they're doing what they're doing is because, universes are colliding. I thought it was, Doctor Strange-esque, but it's not. It's just that basically they're falling into each other's universe, especially because of the collider, and they don't really know what to do except basically go in, grab the villains, put them in this like storage room, and send them back to their own personal universes. By the way, so many Easter eggs with that. One of them being, we seen Childish Gambino's Prowler in there from Spider-Man Homecoming. And oh my gosh, the fans in that theater were going crazy because it's not confirmed, but just seeing him made us feel like Tom Holland will be in the movies soon. And man, that was great. Nevertheless, We also seen, another face that I was personally wanting to see, Mayday Parker. Yes, she's still a baby, obviously. It was cute. We seen Peter Parker, the one from Into the Spider-Verse, the first one. And, it was a real good moment. We see him as a dad. We see him like him and Miles' relationship like starting to try to grow for just the little time he had. He wasn't really prevalent in the movie. But nevertheless, especially other references that they showed a lot of other clips. And when I say clips, I don't mean, oh, they went to their old movies. Like when Spider-Man 2099 started talking about telling Miles that he shouldn't have saved Spider-Man India's father because he kind of messed up what the core of a Spider-Man is supposed to be, getting bit and then losing somebody close and then great power, great responsibility. We end up seeing so many clips, especially of like Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. We see any of the other cartoons, especially where they came on Disney Channel or they came on any of the other networks. I can't remember right now, but so many different iterations, and I was like, man, this is great. And what really sets up, because I know a lot of people were wondering why is 2099 Spider-Man going after Miles in the trailers. What really set that up is the fact that Miles has, outside of his uncle who passed away, Miles has not really had that full-on loss and that great power, great responsibility. And I'm talking about somebody that's outside of being a villain. And that loss would come once his father passed. And Miles is like, well, I'm not for that. I'm gonna go save my father. And 2099 Spider-Man is basically traps him and says, no, you can't do this because it has to happen. So that way your universe stays intact. If you save him, your universe will basically implode in on itself. And what really messes with Miles is the fact that Gwen and a lot of the other people knew about this, especially Peter, the Peter that trained him, and he felt betrayed and hurt. It turned into a big, like, escape from the Spider-Verse. He's trying to run. That's when you see him, like, you see just all the Spider-Mans just like swinging against each other. You see old, new. You see literally the fights and everything, and how each Spider-Man actually just kind of interacts. Very, very funny. Very, very action packed as well. Until eventually Miles gets like he escapes for a little bit, and once Spider-Man 2099 gets a hold of him, he basically tells him that he's a nobody. And Miles is like, no, you're lying. I'm Spider-Man. He tells him that the spider that bit you, that made you into the Spider-Man that you are currently, it was meant for somebody else. It was supposed to be another, I guess, person that became Spider-Man. But the problem is that spider landed in your universe. It crossed dimensions because of that collider and landed in your universe, and that's why you got bit. You were never supposed to be Spider-Man. And that really, really set off Miles. And it made it worse because, again, Gwen and all of them knew that, but they didn't tell him. So he feels really, really betrayed. Like he can't trust anybody other than himself. So what ends up happening? He basically escapes again. He comes up with a plan like everybody does. It seems like they don't have a plan, but then they do. So he ends up escaping back to his universe. 2099 gets really, really angry, sends Gwen back to her universe, says you're off the team, and now they're on the hunt for not only Spot, but they're also on the hunt for Miles Morales. Because if he saved his father, everything will implode. And what makes it crazy is that Gwen is hurt, and she does what she can to get back to Peter to try to talk to him. But what ends up happening, and I'm forgetting a part. Well, I'm not forgetting. I'm leaving out a part about the dynamic between Gwen and her father. But I'm not gonna spoil, I guess, every single thing. Just I'm talking about the real main points. Nevertheless, you sit there and you realize that Peter goes and he talks to his parents to let them know, hey, I'm Spider-Man. This is why I'm being late. But it's only his mom, and she's just laughing at him like, I don't know who Spider-Man is. And the reason why she doesn't is because, like 2099 Spider-Man told him, the spider that bit you came from another universe. So when Miles basically asked and tried to program himself to get sent back home, he got sent back to the universe where the spider was supposed to be. And in that one, that's when things get real hectic because you then find out that his uncle never died, and you also find out that his father is the one that died. And the crazy part about it is you're thinking, okay, well, he's the Prowler. But what actually has happened is that in that universe, that actual universe, Miles Morales ended up becoming the Prowler himself. And it's like, oh my gosh. And Gwen realizes this because she ends up in his actual universe but can't find him. And that's when she puts two and two together and says, oh, we have to go find him in that other universe. We don't know where 2090. It isn't said where 2099. No, that's a lie. 2099 Spider-Man and Scarlet Spider Ben Riley, they did end up landing in the universe he was supposed to be in, as in Miles Morales. But Gwen sits there. She gets Ben Riley to she throws him back into a portal when he's not really on guard, and then she goes back to Peter's universe and she rallies up the gang. And now movie ends. Movie ends with Spot still getting ready to go back to Miles Morales' original universe and create havoc and kill his family. And the return of Peter Parker Spider-Man, Spider-Man Noir, Spider-Ham, I believe the anime Spider-Man, and a couple of others. And we're set now. Pros and cons of this movie after just giving basically the recap of it. Man, the pros. This movie aesthetically was beautiful. And this might be a hot take, and you guys can leave what you think in the comment section. But I think this is arguably the best Spider-Man movie. And I mean that seriously. Like, I would even hold the reservations to even possibly put this over No Way Home. And I know how much hype that had with Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield coming to reprise their roles. So, yeah, this movie was aesthetically pleasing. This movie didn't give you, especially when it came to the Spider-Man, nobody was necessarily wrong. It's just the fact that nobody knew how to understand certain things. Like, if you're Miles, you're not thinking, well, if I like let my father die, then the universe and everything will be saved and it's perfectly fine. You're saying, no, I already lost my uncle. I'm not losing my dad. And if you're 2099 Spider-Man or any of the other Spider-Man, you're like, I get how much family means to you. But if you don't do that, not only will your universe implode, but the rest of our universes will implode or collapse alongside it and kill us as well. And it's not, especially with the Spider-Man, it's not necessarily something that you can really answer, especially because 2099 Spider-Man tried it. He tried to go to another universe and like live out a life that wasn't supposed to be his, and that universe collapsed. Luckily enough, it didn't have a domino effect on the other universes, but if Miles did, especially with spot hopping universes and everything, yeah, it would have went down really really bad. So when it came to the Spider-Men and Spider-Women, there nobody was necessarily wrong. I also loved that, again, they took a villain like Spot, a villain that people really don't know about and don't really care that much about, and made him somebody that's like really menacing and really captivating. Like, of course, think about it when we look at Spider-Man. Who are the people that we usually think of? Green Goblin, the Lizard, Venom, Craven, Shocker, Electro. There's Doc Ock. There's so many iconic villains. And then you have like the ones that aren't really known. And I think when it comes to I guess some new comics, we're starting to really get villains and per se certain hero characters that we don't hear much of. And I'm always down for that because as a comic book fan, even if I didn't grow up with these heroes or villains, as in if I didn't grow up with certain heroes or certain villains, because of course I grew up, I one some of my first comic books I owned were Spider-Man comics, but I didn't know too much about Spot, and this gets me like really invested in the going to really checking for those old comics and checking for those old other mediums where Spot was featured, so I could probably, you know, laugh if they made him goofy or really sit there and take him serious and really look at his other origins and kind of compare it to the movies. So that was really, really done. Like I said, I already said art wise, it was good. Soundtrack was cool. It wasn't, I think I still would take the first Into the Spider-Verse soundtrack over this one, but that's again personal preference. It's not saying this soundtrack was bad because by no means was this soundtrack bad at all. I just feel like the first one was better. Um, he said the introduction, of course, the what is it, fan service per se of how many different spider people there are, and for the ones that I actually, either had in game or played in game or not, then it really made me like point out everything, and it touched my very nerdy heart. So I really, really enjoyed that. I love the setups, especially like the villains. The fact that Miles ended up getting sent to the original universe where the spider was supposed to be, and that he's seeing an alternate version of himself as a villain. I enjoy the fact that there was like honest character change. Like at first, Spider Woman was like all for Gwen, saying, "No, no, she's great, she's great." But then once she realized that Gwen was in love and is in love with Miles, and that was kind of clouding her judgment on certain things, she started to back up, saying, "Hey, you're doing a little too much, and you're compromising the mission." But nevertheless, it ends with her not going after Gwen and realizing Gwen may be onto something, and maybe Gwen's gut will actually save this multiverse. And I'm really, really happy to say they really did the characters they focused on. They really, really did hammer in. Of course, some of them were just there just to be characters. Like Ben Riley Spider Man was just there to be funnily enough, like almost the broody. The rain is pouring on me as I'm standing in front of a burning building or something like that. It's like monologuing, funny enough. This movie, by the way, I've said it a bunch of times. The movie was very funny. Like it wasn't just let's try to shove comedy down your throat like some of the MCU movies have been trying to do, especially Thor: Love and Thunder. But it had really good funny moments. And overall, not only was Miles great, but the supporting cast was great. And the way they started this movie off, I definitely thought it was going to be more Gwen Stacy centric, but and it still kind of was, but it definitely felt like Gwen and Miles were both co-protagonists instead of it being like Miles protagonist and Gwen is side character or side slash second main character. And I felt like they somewhat were almost on equal uh main character vibes. And I was really down for that. Now, for a con, and it's very nitpicky. And I say that's the reason why I said this. I love this movie a lot. I'm definitely going to see it again. And it's very nitpicky. They continue with the trend of whenever a new Spider-Man was introduced, they did the comic book of saying, "Okay, now let's do this again. I'm Spider-Man. I got bit by a radioactive spider, and I did this and did this." In the first movie, it was fine. They was trying something new. In this movie, I didn't need it that much. Like it after the first movie, I was like, okay, we don't have to continue to do this. They didn't do that for every Spider-Man that was introduced, but they did it for who was it? They did it for Spider-Punk. They did it for Spider-Man India. I think they did it for Gwen again. They did it for Miles, not Miles, for Spider-Man 2099. It was like I don't need to continue with that trend. And like I said, they set it up for a second movie. Well, technically third, but they said to be continued, so a part two to the second movie. And from what I've seen, at least one of my friends that I went to the movies with showed me, I believe it's supposed to come out and release March of 2024. And yes, that's my review on the movie. But before we go, there was a couple of things that I really, really wanted to talk about. And it has to do with Sony. Now, before I get into the real main movie issue, well, not issue, but movie thing that I want to talk about when it comes to Sony, Sony, if you are listening, I am very, very upset that I had Spider-Man downloaded on my PlayStation and you decided to take it off. I have your PlayStation Plus membership and you decided to take it off and I had to literally rebuy the game. That kind of sucked. I really did not appreciate that. I understand, but actually I really don't understand. I understand the capitalistic reason for it, but nevertheless, I didn't like it. Now, back to rant aside, back to the movies. Um, I really want people in the comments to give me their opinion, but I wonder where everything is going to go with Sony. And I say that because for the longest, with Marvel taking Spider-Man, it was like, oh my gosh, we're waiting for Marvel to just buy the rights to Spider-Man. We don't have to worry about anything. They weren't doing that. They was back and forth feud. Maybe Spider-Man won't be in the MCU anymore unless they get bought out. And then we have Sony dropping some stinkers. I'm looking at you, Morbius. And dropping some okay films, being Venom. But then you have the Miles Morales Spider-Man, and they've been doing good. And this one was borderline perfect to me. And it really makes me wonder, how is everything going to be with the rest of the Sony universe? Because Sony still owns the rights to Spider-Man. They just don't necessarily own. They own more so the rights to being able to use Spider-Man characters in their own cinematic universe. That's why we got Venom. That's why we got Morbius. And Marvel kind of just borrows, well, Marvel slash Disney just kind of borrows Spider-Man and borrows this, but Sony still gets a real good cut of that. So my biggest question is, if Sony keeps being successful, especially with the Miles Morales Spider-Man, what's the MCU gonna do? And I say that because especially with Childish Gambino showing the live action and being Prowler in this animated film, and we're sitting there looking at it and be like, is Tom Holland gonna be, in the Sony universe? He gonna pop up? Because a couple of us speculated that in the third one we might get Toby and Andrew and Tom just voicing over, and that would be very, very great. But the question is, will it happen? And if not, then what's the likelihood of Miles ever coming to the MCU? They already hinted at it in Homecoming, and Secret Wars is coming out, and we already know at the end of No Way Home that the Venom symbiote is in the MCU. So at some point, we know Peter's gonna get black suit. And especially with Spider-Man 2, the video game, coming out later this year, what is really the likelihood of Miles ever coming over? Because it seems like Tom will be over in Sony before Miles will be over at Marvel and Disney. And originally, growing, especially with the debacle, I sat back and said, no, I want Marvel to just take over, not take over fully, but just take all the rights to Spider-Man back. And yeah, we don't have to worry about this. But the MCU has been kind of hit or miss recently. Some people don't even check on it as much as they used to. And for me, I just really wonder what the future of Spider-Man is going to be. I already know that Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is going to do crazy numbers. It's going to be number one in the world. Number one, especially in the US too. And I know there's a very, very high chance that outside of fighting games, and maybe some real good single player games, that Spider-Man 2 might take Game of the Year at the Gaming Awards. And if you have if you're going on a trend like that, if Marvel and Disney ever wanted to buy Spider-Man back from Sony, then the price is only going up. And then outside of that, what why would Sony even sell? They will have no reason or need to sell to Disney and Marvel. And now at that point, if they really become successful with this Spider-Verse, then the only thing that can really happen would just be that the ball will be in Sony's court. They already, from what I've seen, or their leaks and rumors, that they have a slew of movies they're thinking about making. Kraven the Hunter, Silk, like, I think maybe Sinister Six. So, like, you have a lot of this. You have a Venom 3 that's going to be in the making. I don't think they're going to continue Morbius, but it's one of those things where it's like you have content. You have these, as long as you make really good movies, then what do you do? And yes, of course, I would love to see Miles in the MCU, as well as I would love to see Tom Holland, Tobey Maguire, and Andrew Garfield in Spider-Verse. But then here's another question I would bring up that nobody's has talked about. As much as we talked about how Tom Holland could come to Sony and how there's rumors of that, after No Way Home, people petitioned for Andrew Garfield to get his third movie. So again, what's stopping Sony at that point from then continuing Andrew Garfield's story? I know it would be like, continuity issues on which the real Spider-Man and things like that. And there being two different Spider-Man films, one coming from Disney, one coming from Sony. But what's really stopping them? And everything in between. Shoot, I say this also, especially with the introduction of Mayday Parker. Of course, again, she's a baby. But could this also be a catalyst to even hint at Mephisto? And I say that because this is the comic book nerd coming out of me. We have it to where Mephisto ruined Peter and Mary Jane's relationship so that Mayday Parker wouldn't be born. Doctor Strange found this out, and you found out that Mayday Parker ends up going up against Mephisto, and I believe defeating Mephisto. So, what do we do with that? And I know the rumors of Mephisto in the Marvel universe and everything is always running rampant, especially when it comes to Doctor Strange. But there are a lot of things, a lot of questions that I don't think need to be answered immediately, but that pop up, and it makes us as fans of these movies, fans of these characters, whether we just got into it or we've been following them since their first iteration or we got into it because of the TV shows. Nevertheless, these are real life questions that I don't even know what how to answer. I already feel like we might get a Venom tease, or we might get Symbiote Spider-Man, which, by the way, we didn't see. Symbiote Spider-Man isn't in the movie, as well as Superior Spider-Man, which is Spider-Man with the brain and the consciousness of Dr. Ock, which, oh man, I really, really wanted to see that one. But maybe they'll be in the third movie. And like I said, it makes you really, really wonder where we can go, because Sony has put this movie out and it's phenomenal. Like, I would argue say 10 out of 10. It's a must see, not once, not twice, but 3, 4, 5, as many times as you can see until you just get tired of it. And then if you forget about the movie and then the movie comes out on DVD and you want to be a collector, buy the movie. I might look at getting me a DVD of it just so I can have it in the collection, because this movie was great. I thoroughly recommend this movie. And yeah, that's all I gotta say about it. Hope you all enjoy. Please, again, like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends. Upcoming week, we're going to be hitting Transformers, and man, I can't wait to talk about that one, especially because if it goes from, I try not to, this is especially with a lot of movies, I try not to see too many trailers because a lot of movie trailers of recent times have spoiled most of the movie, or at least shown most of the movie, and it's like, let's not do that. I like to be surprised. But I already know the hints and everything of Unicron being in the Transformers Rise of the Beast movie, and from the images I've seen, especially from the first trailer and the trailers they usually show in the movie theater, I'm really having high expectations. And I know, especially once I see the movie, I'm probably going to have a conversation with you, the audience, about the Michael Bay versions of the Transformers versus which the new reboot of the Nightverse of the Transformers, and we'll discuss. But one down, especially of movies I have high expectations to go, I have, and I've seen one more to go. Transformers Don't Let Me Down. Like I said, thank you all for listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Share with your friends. And I'll see you all on the next one.